In the next few slides, I've indicated some thoughts on reviewing the pool for semi-finalist and finalist selection. One of the things that I like to do is to value the selection committee's decisions individually. And so what I suggest is that people take away their notes from behavioral interviews, their comments. They also have a set of rubrics that everyone's agreed to evaluate candidates with. Go back to their home base, read through the material, make their choices individually. Now, for semifinalists, it could be 1 to 10. For finalists, it could be 2 or 3 of their choices. They come back then as a group, and each individual on a blackboard or flip chart paper put up their choices. And then everyone can have a look without a discussion. Normally, you will find that most people select 1 or 2 candidates unanimously who they wish to bring in at a semifinalist or finalist selection stage. Remember, you're not picking anyone yet. You're just bringing them in for interviews. And of course, a discussion then can narrowly focus appropriately on candidates who some people have high on their list, others have low. So let's discuss them and make up the difference in that discussion. So that way you're able to not only value each person's decision, but then collectively make decisions on individuals who everyone had different opinions about. Now, when you're looking at interviews for semi-finalists, you can do about 3 in a day. They're 2-hour or 90-minute interviews, and so they're lengthy, but it's important that happens. There are a couple of things that you should bear in mind in terms of selection of candidates. One thing is that as you go through the resume, your written material, you're going to find some individuals who may be very compelling, but there might be something in their material that give you pause. And I think there are several things you should do before making a decision. I call it a quarterfinalist interview. So you can either not take action, decide, no, we're not going to do that, bring this person forward, or you can break your group up into small teams to interview the candidates and ask them to speak to certain areas that you had some concerns about. Or you can have them write responses to that in terms of a written response to those areas. And then you review that information and then decide. The other option, of course, is to simply bring them forward and pose the questions at the interview. So don't give up on people without at least making a decision to either follow up or not before making a final selection. The other area that you might want to talk about, and it's very important, is to ask candidates, particularly at the semi-finalist stage, and of course it'll also be at the finalist stage, about their total compensation package. I know that you've put a salary scale or a grid, whatever you may want to call it, a range, if you will, on the job. But when the water hole gets smaller, the animals look at each other differently. So when they know they're seriously being considered, sometimes things move in a different fashion. So I think one of the things that's very important in determining whether a person comes forward, particularly at the semifinalist stage, because they will also be finalists, is what they're looking for with regards to a total package. And that'll give you a better indication of, do we want to bring this person forward? Can we negotiate? What do we think? Assessing the dossiers is another thing you need to consider. The dossier is made up of 2 parts. The resume, which they have put together unabridged. It's not a standard format because it's important, I think, you see how people organize themselves in terms of their resume. And, of course, the answer to the questions, both in writing and also verbally. And so that's what you have in your hand. I think that one of the things you soon find out is that there are differences in people's careers. Some people stay in one place a lot longer. Some people move around a lot. Neither of those things are necessarily good or bad. So I think what you need to do is, and I've outlined several questions you need to ask yourself as a committee member, why you think that individual has had job transitions. And these questions, of course, will give you a better sense of what you're looking at in terms of people's careers. And if you don't get the answer, you can certainly ask when you decide to bring that person forward, if you do, to interview them. In video number 4, I'm going to present a few slides that will give the search committee or board some suggestions and protocols regarding the finalist interview days. And you can see here there's a number of things that need to be considered when you're working through the development of a search. Besides that, there's other areas you need to take a look at. And these are very, very important because the candidates are also measuring you as well as you measuring them. So it's very important that all of the information that's in these particular slides are considered when you're bringing finalists in to make a decision on an appointee. This particular slide is designated for the chair of the search committee or the chair of the board. It's a little narrower in focus, but it also gives the chair the idea of what has to happen next and a sense of what they have to do preparing for finalist days. Here is a sample schedule, and you can see the days tied up very tightly with interviews, with tours, with meeting various people formally and informally. So getting to know the candidate and also the candidate's significant other or spouse, if that's appropriate, because all of that will have to be considered in a candidate making a decision to accept an appointment. The candidate certainly will have to give a presentation, and here is an example of a 15 to 20 minute presentation and what the candidate would be expected to do and present. I mentioned earlier in one of the videos that it's important to have your stakeholders involved in this, and you're going to see in a moment there are 2 feedback type forms, one for the stakeholders in the audience and the other for the board members who are looking to make the decision. This particular slide will give you a sense of what you need to do for a public presentation. I would not recommend that you hand out resumes, but simply have a précis prepared. You can do it, or you can have the candidates do it. If you don't, what will happen is some members of the audience will inevitably contact a former, particularly a recent and a current employer, if they happen to know them, to get a lead on them. And of course, although your reference checks, and we'll talk about those later, will have to cover all of the referees, the immediate supervisor is held off until a decision is made on an appointee, subsequent to a recommendation from the current employer. So you don't want anyone making that call, because in some cases people have not indicated that they've applied for a position. Here is one of the evaluation forms, and this would be one that would be used more by the search committee or the board in their interview process, probably the board, to give an evaluation of the candidate. And here's the form that you would use for employees or staff. And you can see there are some simple questions. Nowhere on this form does it indicate who you should hire. That's not the business of the employees or staff. They want only to be part of giving you some feedback. You're responsible as a board to hire the individual, and you're accountable for that hire. But this will give you a sense of what people in the audience thought as they listened to the presentations. You can get more informal in a coffee and gathering over food between presentations, where people can talk back and forth. It's very important that you do not allow questions from the floor. Some of them would not be appropriate. I've seen that happen. And you don't want to get into a debate between someone who has a different sense than everyone else in the audience and the candidate. As they say, share it tightly, and have any informal questions go on at a kind of an informal gathering after presentations. This final video will speak to the very important process of reference checks and background checks. You can see on the screen what you would ask semifinalists, candidates to provide to you, so that you're prepared when they and if they become finalists to move ahead with reference checks. The video that you see now would be what you would use as a board member or a member of the committee as you call and contact referees and ask them questions. And you can see a list of 8 or 9 questions there that would be appropriate, right in the exact words that the individual says, so you can put together a composite on each candidate. You should find some relationship in the answers to those oral questions on the written answers back early in the process with respect to what candidates said about themselves. One of the things that I always warn people about is not not to do reference by Google. What search engine would you use? They're not valid. The only way that you can validate information is through a face-to-face reference call and background and criminal checks that also can be provided in terms of companies who do those things. At the same time, you may find that there are some areas of concern. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the process, there are several ways that you can do that. It might be a career path issue. It might be something they said during an interview, whatever it might be. You can decide not to move the candidate forward. You can conduct a mini or quarter finalist interview to get an answer. Ask for written responses, as I said earlier. Pose questions for a candidate at a meeting as well. Also remember that there are some very important questions that are introduced back at the behavioral interview stage. One requires candidates to announce to the committee if there's anything in their background or in their history that would impact on the decision to offer you the position. That's starting point. One will be having in mind their efforts at looking at similar jobs in the area. What would be a compensation package that they would expect? And the third is, if they're offered the position, what would you need to put into place to confirm their acceptance? Here's an example of background checks that can be done. All of these companies will conduct them, and it'll go as deep as you want in terms of background checks on candidates, and they must be done. I have to stress, you must do reference checks diligently, and you must do background checks. The following piece is what I call letter of intent, and you'll see that, and there's a couple parts to it. A letter of intent is a way of getting a candidate committed almost immediately if you decide to offer the appointment. It's important because generally contracts are more convoluted. They go back and forth, lawyer to lawyer. They take time. This letter of intent, essentially a 2-pager, commits you as a board, as a school, as a community group, as a business to a candidate, and that candidate is committed to you. Here are some closing strategies for a CEO or leadership search, and I won't go through these bit by bit, but you get an idea once you read them that it follows some of the things I've already said, and make sure that you take these seriously and that you look at them carefully, because as I say, candidates are also evaluating you as a possible employer as well as you looking at them as an employee. I want to spend a little bit of time talking in summary form about how to identify candidates for the highest level of leadership search. As you can see here, and this is from my own experience over a number of years, a search must be active, not passive. You go and find people. You don't wait on ads and you don't wait for people to apply. You actively outreach, as it says, to people who are happy where they are, but they're ready for a challenge or a change in their location or in their position. All potential candidates are required to address a series of written questions that are directly related to the job expectations, and that's important and that's critical. Every candidate who is submitted must be interviewed personally. And that again is important. You review the responses to the written questions in that interview. You ask cold call questions because you want to see how people write and how people speak. The final pool candidate will include dossiers that include resumes plus responses to questions. And certainly that'll give you some written information, but it's only partway there. The behavior interviewing technique is introduced at the semifinalist stage. It's a package, you've seen it here before, with questions and rubrics for evaluation of responses that will be addressed in the presentation. Reference checks must be done for all finalists, as well as background checks, and written reports prepared so the search committee or board can read them and get a sense of what they are looking for. And finally, how would you ensure a successful search? It's important to stick to the process. Since they are designed to open up candidates, reveal who they are in incremental steps, contain checks and balances, and avoid red flag issues that can negatively impact search if you don't do that. You base it on issues and challenges facing the school in the next 5 to 10 years, as opposed to trying to match or look for someone opposite from the person who is in the job or a personality. That will be doomed to fail, in my view. You have to base it on issues and challenges. Although candidate competency is important, you have to develop strategies and questions to determine best fit for the job. And as I mentioned earlier, they aren't necessarily the same. And your search consultant as well should be able to advise you if things are starting to move in a different direction and keep the process moving in a positive manner. I would also recommend then that if you have questions and wish to contact me, it's barryrowland4@gmail.com. And I'll mention that again, barryrowland4@gmail.com. I'd be pleased to respond to anything that you have as far as questions are concerned, or if you have any suggestions regarding what you might do in your situation or are looking for a consultant who might be able to advise you and take on a search, I'd be pleased to help with that.